Hi guys, Christine
Hello.
here with Brad and Mark, and we are here to talk all things copy. How are you guys doing today? Hope you're doing really well. Uh, by by the way, if you have any comments or questions for us while we're doing the webinar, type them in the chat on the side there for the webinar, and we will happily respond. So if there's anything you have any questions or concerns about, if you have trouble hearing, whatever, let us know. I am, as I said, Christine Potter, and I am one of the senior copywriters and editor for Scientific Copy. Brad Nell, who is one of our professional copywriters, and Mark McRae, our copy chief and fearless leader. What was it you called yourself last week? The commander in chief. Yes, the commander in chief of copy are here with me today, and we are going to talk about what I think is the single most important part of copywriting, and it's revising. Okay. So I love this quote. Saint, noun, a dead sinner, revised and edited. That's by author Ambrose Bierce, and nothing could be truer. Famously, there is I want to say it's Fitzgerald, that said you have to kill your darlings, meaning that as a writer, you have to be willing to part with something you personally fell in love with if it doesn't advance your story. As a copywriter, you have to be willing to part with anything that doesn't advance your sale. And that is what we are going to talk about today. Today is a little different than the last few you've seen. We don't have like our fun stats section with Mark, and we don't have a little workshop-y thing. We are going to take you through. It is something that our company uses. It is our personal secret for how we've written over $70 million in killer copy. So be prepared to take notes, be prepared to ask questions, and understand we're not going to give it to you in 1, 2, 3 steps on this PowerPoint. You're going to have to catch it as we go because it is a secret. Okay. So our secret formula to make any copy instantly better. Like I said, make sure you have pen and paper handy. You will want to take notes. If you ask us a question today that we use, hold on 1 second, please. I thought I had that fixed. If we ask you a question today, or you ask us a question today, rather, that we use on the webinar, we will send you your very own copy of the book Copy Logic, the new science of breakthrough copy without criticism. Part of what we do is to, hold on 1 second, hold on guys. Sorry about that. Give me 1 second. So you ask us a question and we read it out loud and use it. We will send you a copy of Copy Logic. Copy Logic was first introduced to me by Mark McRae nearly 3 years ago, when I went, along with several other people, down under where he lives to visit him. And he was very excited. I insisted that we all read this book. It's very short. Okay, it's a short book, but it is so packed with information. All right. It kind of revolutionized what we do to some degree. It definitely informed some of our revision process. So you could do a lot worse than following this. This is the model that Gora famously has used for years. They may have gone away from it now, I'm not really sure. But this was their model for copy revision for many years. Okay, so first we're going to go over 3 basic tips for revision. And one of the things, the first one here that cracked me up, Mark mentioned, we should make sure we read it. We read our copy out loud every single day. If we haven't read it aloud to ourselves before we submit it, chances are it's not nearly as good as it would be otherwise. And anyone who is reviewing copy for the day reads it out loud, animatedly, not just top 3 tips for revision, read it aloud animatedly. No, top 3 tips for revision, read it aloud animatedly, so that you are getting the full force of the words and the ideas. And it's one of the quickest ways to find where you've gotten too wordy, you've used words more than once, you have what, as an editor, I call that-itis, where to set off important points, you're putting a that before almost everything, and it's really annoying to the reader. It is one of the best tips. It's quite funny. I was watching another copywriter who has a course out there. He's fairly famous. And he actually said on camera for the world, I don't know if there's anyone else in the world who does this. I've never heard anyone talk about it. But you need to read your copy aloud like a script. And I was cracking up. So, like, we do that every single day. So that is one tip for you. Okay.
Now, if I just interject there a second, Christine, one of the reasons why are you reading it out loud? And it's primarily to see how it flows. So if you're reading your copy and you come across a word that you personally are struggling to say, or you get tongue-tied, or it seems out of place, or for whatever reason your brain hesitates for a second, that's called a block.
Yep.
Right? So, and the more blocks you have in your copy, the less sales you're going to make. It's got to flow to the point where you're leading people to an action. So it might be an action to click something, it might be to take a sale, to buy something, it could be whatever. But the point is of reading it out loud is that you can hear what other people hear in their head. So, anything that makes you stumble is something you have to rewrite.
Also, one of the most informative things is to listen either live or to a recording of someone else reading your copy, because you will be amazed at what they choose to put the emphasis on that wasn't what you heard in your head.
Yeah.
They're bringing their understanding of how they process language to what you wrote. And it really helps you to understand that what was in your head might not be what the reader pulls out of it. In most cases it is, particularly if you follow these tips and you revise properly. In most cases you're dragging them from sentence to sentence exactly the way you want to. But it is really informative to listen to someone else. And it's particularly fun when Mark reads our copy out loud, because he's got that lovely accent. And when he's really into it, he does voices. It's fun. Okay. So anything you'd like to add here, Brad, before I go on?
Oh, we've lost you, Brad.
Uh-oh.
Or you're miming.
He's muted again.
Oh, no, sorry. Yeah, no, I think so, Christine. Flow, I think, is the key thing there. Letting somebody else read it is a great idea, too. I think you're going to touch on that in a minute. So all this, yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. So top 3 tips for revision number 2. Once you've written it, walk away. If you can, let it sit for a day. Then go back and read it out loud again. Because the person you were when you wrote it and the person you are when you sit down to read it the second time, you've gone through a whole 24-hour cycle. You are in some realm a different person by then. You've had a whole other 24 hours of experiences. And these words have lived in your head now for a day. And it's very helpful. I heard, Mark, you want to say something?
No, I think that's, for me, the mood thing is important, but for me, the most important thing is typos, especially if you're a one-man show.
Definitely.
You write something, you can't see it. And if you're under the gun and you got to get it out, then you got to get it out. But if you have the luxury of leaving it, and the longer the better, when you go back, you often pick up typos that you never saw.
Yeah. And as an editor, I'm really, really anal about typos. There are certain stylistic things we can get away with as copywriters that say if you're an English teacher, you would never do. But Mark can always tell if I'm under the weather or I'm rushing, because he'll find 3 or 4 typos in an email. In most cases, it's surprising if he finds one. But that is very important too. There's a school of thought that it doesn't matter if you have a few typos, that it makes it seem more down to earth, more real. Here's the thing though. We are trained to read in a certain way. Our minds actually scan a page, be it online or in a book or a newspaper, to tell how easy or hard we think something's going to be to read. And if we start reading and we hit typo and then we hit another typo, all those bumps, like Mark was talking about with flow, those bump the reader out. They won't even be able to tell you what it was that bugged them necessarily, but it'll bug them. It's this little subconscious niggle. And while in testimonials or other people's words, leaving typos in is sometimes helpful, in your main sales copy, be it an email, a product description, a sales page, an advertisement in the paper, making sure you've got all of your T's crossed and your I's dotted and everything in the right order is very important. Okay. Third tip out of 3 for revision.
Another thing too, Christine, when you're writing, a lot of times your brain knows what you're trying to say. If you're writing quickly and you know you've nailed an idea and you want to get it down on paper, the words just flow, but it's what's in your head. And oftentimes you don't see the typos and the errors in what you just wrote. Your brain knows what you were trying to say and it thinks it's okay, but that's why you've got to have an editor go back and look at it after you're done.
True. It's very important to have another set of eyes, because if you're the only set, your brain's already encoded with the words, just like what Brad was talking about. Yeah, very important, which is why tip 3, provide it to some trusted readers for honest feedback, which means they could tell you, this is the most boring piece of crap I've ever read. I wouldn't even click on a link, let alone get out my wallet and buy anything. You have to be prepared to hear that and take it gracefully, because you'd probably like a person who's willing to be that honest to read more of your copy. What we do and what we're going to go into in this webinar is we have a process for doing this with our team. And the feedback is incredibly honest. And one of the, if you ever have reason to work with us, and specifically with Mark or for Mark, if you ever hear it tastes like chicken, you know you've got a rewrite on your hands. He is brutally honest. He pulls no punches, and he's fantastic at it. He knows where the flow is. He knows what there is that is working and what is not. So you want it to not taste like chicken, but you want the person who's willing to tell you it tastes like chicken to be the one reading your copy. Okay? All of our mothers or our spouses or our kids, they may love it just because it's us. They're going to be nice. You don't want nice. You want brutal. Okay? Anything there, gentlemen?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Marcus, you did.
I'm trying to remember where it tastes like chicken comes from. I think it's actually David Ogilvy.
I always think of the movie The Matrix when you say
yeah.
that kid rabbit, why and how do we decide what tastes like chicken? But I get it. It's like, it's generic. It's not spicy. It's not sexy. And so that's code for us. If we get the chicken comment, we know we're in trouble. Okay. So we're going to go over now what our proprietary process is. We are going to show you emails, 2 emails that I'm not going to tell you. If you've watched our other programs, you know that one of the emails I'm going to show you was already wildly successful. We're not going to tell you if these emails were good or not while we go through them. And we are going to pause and we are going to ask for your feedback on these, okay? We're going to go through them and we're going to explain to you how we evaluate, how we recommend changes, and that thing that was in the on the cover of CopyLogic, to do it without criticism or without critique. That's really important, and that's the difference between evaluating and creating better copy and just being a critic. Because if all you do is say, I don't like this, or this didn't work for me, or even it tastes like chicken, without something really concrete about what specifically didn't work and why it didn't work and how to fix it, then you're not doing anyone any favors. All you're doing is frustrating the writer. Okay? So bear that in mind. What you're about to learn is proprietary. We would like you to not share it without our express written permission. Okay? We are going to give it to you verbally. You're not going to see it on a screen. So if you've got your pen and paper handy, this is where we start. Okay? All right. And by the way, I didn't say hi to everybody individually, and I apologize for that. I will catch up with you in the Q&A, I promise. Okay. As I said, we'll not write it down for you. We will not put it on these slides. We will teach it to you, and it really should, not could, it really should improve your copy overnight. All right. If you watched last week, this is a familiar slide to you. This is the beginning of a piece of copy that was written by Brad last year. If you are a part of our group, there are 5 key areas that we break each piece of copy into, and each one of those gets its own particular score. Okay? Now, right now, off the top, there's one thing missing on what I have here. Can anyone tell me what it is? Brad, you don't get to answer because you know.
Good idea.
Anybody out there in webinar land know what it is that is missing? Anyone? Anyone? No? Okay. All right. How are you going to get an email opened if there's no subject line? The reason there's no subject line on this one is because this got converted and became another different piece of copy. It was used for something else, and the subject line wasn't saved on my version. Okay, but that would be the very first thing evaluating this would be, where's your subject line? Nothing's going to happen if there's no subject line. Okay, so that would be a big fat 0 goose egg on that. All right. Who can I tap, gentlemen, to read? If you need it to be me, it'll be me.
I wrote it. It's probably a good idea if somebody different than me reads it.
All right, I'll read them. How to protect your family ahead of the looming global financial apocalypse, one poised to collapse major banks and decimate economies in 2017. So you could prosper during and after the dust finally settles.
Okay. So that's your headline. What we do is we look at that headline and we evaluate with regard to, would this make me need to read what the rest of this email is? And Mark, why don't you go ahead and share your thoughts on this particular one?
I'm not sure. Are you going to get into scoring as well just now?
I think it's more of a flow of consciousness thing as we do it. We break it out. Subject line would have gotten a score, right? This would get a score. I'm not going to talk about the parameters of the scoring yet.
Okay.
necessarily.
Mm-hmm. Well, look, the demographics for this particular market are, although it ranges from 18 to 70 plus, the sweet spot is 50 to 70 years of age. And it would be a male. 98% of the people who are in that market are males. And they would have a college education with an income of around $50,000. Now, anybody who falls into that category, particularly in America, is worried about their future, right? So if you're 50 and you're talking to 100 people, 98 of them have a financial problem, right? A couple of them will be fine. But when this reads, how to protect your family ahead of the looming global financial apocalypse. So protect your family, you'll see is highlighted in red. And that grabs them, right? Because a 50-year-old man probably has youngish, adultish kids who are just finishing school, but he's very conscious of, being able to support his family financially. And then it goes on, one poised to collapse major banks and decimate economies in 2017. Regardless of how much money that person has, he's worried about it. Maybe he only has. In fact, I think we figured out that 2/3 of Americans couldn't raise $3,000, some number like that. But whatever money they have, whether it's 500 or 700 or whatever, they're worried about it. They can't afford to lose that money. And then so you could prosper during and after the dust finally settles. And it says, so you could prosper during and after when the dust finally settles. Right. So I think there's a word missing there. So I'm not sure if we've got the original, the final copy. But and that's what my job is, and Christine's is to find things like that. So that would be a block.
In this case, Mark, actually, it's right. The way it is on screen is right. Yeah.
So you could
during and
prosper
after the dust finally settles.
During and after the dust finally settles. So you could prosper, right? So there's a possibility of making some money. So generally, it's a very good headline, or lead, as we would call it in an email.
Right. And the other thing to bear in mind is this art that is directly below it is, you talk about a picture being worth 1,000 words. There is nothing more terrifying, particularly in the United States right now, than the prospect of a giant mushroom cloud. So even though Brad wrote this last year before anybody realized what was going to be going on, this is very effective. Okay. And we'll talk about how we score this once we get in. Now, this headline, including the art, because the art most assuredly is part of the headline in this situation, that would get its own particular breakout score. If this headline contained a particular point of pressure for a secret or something being revealed, that would also get an extra bump because it's giving us that secret. Now, this alludes to how to protect your family. But what it's really pushing you for isn't that there's this secret that's going to necessarily swoop in and save you, but that you're going to get some hard and fast guidance on how to survive. Okay. So now this is a very long email, so we may not go through all of it. We will go through the first third of the deck copy, however, and the deck, for folks who don't know, your deck is your main copy. And in most cases, when we're talking about the top of the deck, we're talking about the first 3 to 5 paragraphs. Now, in copywriting, a paragraph isn't like when you open up a book, for those of you who are not familiar. You open up a book, you get these nice, 4 or 5 sentence paragraphs. In copywriting, could be a sentence, could be a word. Okay. So here's the bottom of that same picture again. And I'll go ahead and read this part, Mark. What I am about to tell you is terrifying. However, In order for you to protect yourself from what will most certainly result in the catastrophic destruction of hopes and dreams for millions of unprepared people, you need to understand the sheer scope of this problem. In a moment, I'm going to tell you not only how to survive the coming Armageddon, but how to enjoy a prosperous, comfortable lifestyle during and afterwards. Here's what you need to know. Would that make you keep reading? Is the question you ask yourself. Did it hit particular emotional buttons? Definitely, he's telling us right up front, it's terrifying. He wants us to be scared. Now, the reader doesn't know he wants us to be scared. The reader is like, ooh, we're being warned. Excellent. But as a copywriter and an editor, I say, well, that's great. You just told us to be scared. Fantastic. And then he builds it up, building up the problem, making it what did I say last week? The big hairy monster that lives under your bed. And then he starts to give you the payoff. In a moment, I'm going to tell you, right? And the cool thing about in a moment is it's an open loop. Okay. And an open loop in copy means we're going to come back around to it and close it. But it's something that keeps a level of curiosity open. And a lot of people are curious. So we keep reading. I've just been told that we lost Brad. Hopefully he's going to come back. The vagaries of online webinars. You never know when someone's technology is going to be okay or not. So, Mark, what would you say about the top of this deck?
Exactly. I mean, there's actually, I think that you could say, however, could be a bit of a loop too, but in a moment is opening the loop. And why is it important to open a loop? The brain doesn't like things that are not finished. So when you say in a moment, in a minute, or you're going to get an email tomorrow, or the last part of the secret is tomorrow, that's an open loop. And your brain, if it's interesting enough, will do quite a lot to continue reading or be there, or depending on how powerful it is. So again, you've got to remember who you're talking to, your avatar. And a guy who's reading this, and I think there's a little bit of a prepper in everybody, that everybody believes wherever they are, there's that 1,000,001 chance that the government could just fall apart. So, and that's the first thing. So the first 2 paragraphs get you into the story. So it could, blow up from here, or it could be great. But all of the language that somebody who is reading this, the type of lead who would be reading this, is there to keep them involved.
Mm-hmm. So now it begins to be much less about terrifying you as it gives you some social proof. Okay. The coming crisis is so big, financial watchdogs and top economists say there is, quote, virtually no way to estimate its future full and devastating impact around the globe. Investor Warren Buffett called it weapons of mass destruction carrying dangers that, while now latent, are potentially lethal. U.S. National Defense and Intelligence Advisor Jim Rickards says, banks will close, as will exchanges. Money market funds will be inaccessible. Forget trying to get your hands on your money. Trend forecaster Gerald Celente says, this is brand new. They are over their heads and out of their league. They don't know what they're doing. They are making panic decisions, trying to keep the Ponzi alive. I'm talking about the $555 trillion derivatives bubble that will eventually or inevitably collapse big banks and economies past a point of no return. It's not a matter of if it happens, but when. So now we've brought in a whole slew of names that you may or may not know. Warren Buffett is a fairly well-known name, particularly in this niche. Then you've got somebody from the US government saying this is going to be terrible. And then you have someone who watches the markets saying this is going to be terrible. And at the very end, the $555 trillion derivatives bubble. What's a derivative? Why do I need to know? I'd better read this. Anything to add to that, Mark? Uh-oh, have I lost Mark too?
No, I'm here. Just go back a slide to the first slide. And you see here, what I'm about to tell you is terrifying. It's like a little mini problem. And then Brad gives a solution. However, in order to protect yourself, he's going to tell you how to save yourself. Then go back to the one you were just on. So this is exaggerating the problem. So if the guy is worried, right, you could say if you are 50 and slightly overweight, that's 99.9% of the world, right? And you happen to live in wherever it is, your chance of death is like immediate, then you want to keep reading. But so this part of it is there's a problem, and then we're going to bring in credibility. So credibility is an interesting thing. So the best type of credibility would be if you're actually you're on something like this, right? We're next to one another. So whoever's listening to this video automatically assumes that we are all in agreement. We know one another. There's certain things that people assume when we're next to one another. And in some of the studies that they've done, when people are presenting and there's no one there, but they hold up the book of somebody being there, it's almost as powerful as actually having that person there. So Warren Buffett, anybody who's involved in finance knows Warren Buffett. And if he makes a quote, there's an assumption that you know or have read or follow, or there's some kind of connection with Warren Buffett. The other two may not be as well known, but Warren Buffett clinched it so that anybody who doesn't know the other two are going to assume that they're also powerful in their field. And it antagonizes the problem just enough to seem real.
This is the power of rhetoric in action, guys. We're going to do one more section of this before I fast forward to the close, really, I think. So in a minute, I'm going to tell you how to survive the fallout from this ticking time bomb. But first, what is a derivative anyway? At their core, derivatives represent nothing more than a legalized form of gambling. A derivative is simply a bet that something either will or will not happen in the future. It could be whether a company will go bankrupt or whether an interest rate will move up or down. Their value is based on the expected future price movements of their underlying asset. In other words, by themselves, they have zero value. So just like on the last slide where he talked about $555 trillion derivatives market, and I say, oh gosh, what's a derivative? He tells me, because that is a place you can bump somebody right out. If you don't explain, particularly if you're using 50-cent words, and you don't explain what they are in plain language, bye. The tab effect, at minimum, the tab effect comes into full view, which is, gosh, I need to find out what that word means. Boom, open up Google. Next thing you know, they've fallen down some YouTube rabbit hole watching kitten videos and they're gone. So keeping them on your page with your story is vital.
I think also, when Brad has said in a minute, that's keeping the loop open from in a moment that was earlier. And it reinforces the fact that there's still more coming. Now, there's a thing in writing that is very hard to do intentionally, and it's almost impossible to do on a daily basis. But if you can make somebody have an epiphany, if you can make somebody where the light bulb goes on, you've won them, right? If somebody reads something, and it's happened to everybody, might be a magazine, or it might be a review of something, or you'll read something, you go, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. That guy just described that thing. He hit the nail on the head, and I agree with that. And if you can make somebody have that, you've basically shared your philosophy, and they're going to be a lot more likely to believe whatever you say. Mm-hmm. So everybody has heard of there was the financial crisis, but not everybody understands, or not everybody understands what could happen. So if you've given them a reason, as the derivative market, and you can explain that complicated concept simply, it will make sense to a lot of people who are in that niche.
Yep. And, explaining derivatives like this is great. Keeping the loop open, fantastic. Brad, we're glad you're back. Hope we don't lose you again. Let me see what we have next, because where I'm going to go is, I think what I'm going to do is, if there's one more part before we start getting to the solution. Once we hit the solution, I'm probably going to back us up and get into a little bit of the scoring. I could do it either way. Which way would you guys prefer? Would you prefer that we go through the high points of the email and then talk the scoring, or go back and catch up the scoring? Entirely up to you.
I think we'll go back and just keep this train of thought going, okay, unless somebody in the webinar thinks different. And Brad, we can't hear you.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Can hear you now.
Now we can hear you. What were you trying to say?
Yeah, sorry about that. No, I was just going to say, touching on what Mark said there, and Christine mentioned also, being able to explain complicated things in very simple terms. And I've had to learn that the only way that you can really do that is to you have to have a really good understanding of it yourself. You just do. And so that's where the research part of this comes in. I don't know who said it, but there was a quote that I've read many times that says words to the effect that if you can't explain something complex in one or two simple sentences, you don't understand it well enough to be talking about it. So that part's really important.
And it's very true, for sure. All right, so I'm going to go down one more here and see if we're getting to the solution. Not really. Okay, we are still talking about our problem here. Now, remember what I said. This is a very long email. This particular piece actually got turned into a sales page. It was so...
I think it was 8 or 9 pages.
So what we'll do is we're going to back up. Okay, so I mentioned that the subject line, because we don't have one, that would be the first kicker. You would get a 0 on that. Mark, why don't do you want to explain it, or do you want me to explain the scoring?
Yeah, look, we had a kind of rough way that we used to score, and it could be anything. We like it, we don't like it. It could be good and bad. And then I think a sort of evolution for us was when we kind of adopted the copy logic, which is why we recommend that book. Mm-hmm. And the reason we recommend that book is actually Makepeace. In an interview that we did, and I asked them, if you run a copy team, how do you, is there a way that you can improve or monitor or score them, or what would you advise? And he recommended that book. And it's a way, if you're working with a lot of copywriters, to try and get that commonality of results. So it's very hard for writers to write great every day, but you want them, if you have a team, to write within a parameter, and one of the ways to do that is to give bits of it a score. So if you break up your email or your sales page or into different sections, then give it a score. Now, I wouldn't recommend that you give it a score more than 10 for any one point. But, for example, the subject line, you could give it a score of 0 to 10. The lead coming in to the email, same thing. Give everything, the different parts, a score from 0 to 10. So in this case, I would score this probably an 8 or a 9 out of 10. Right? So that way, if you have 5 chunks, and you could give it to Christine or Brad and say, of the 5 chunks, 4 chunks are very good. There are 7+. And but there's 1 chunk that is only scored a 4. Work on that. And it gives the person who's writing direction, right? So they know that, well, okay, that's good. I'll just fix that bit. You don't have to rewrite the whole email. Actually, I just read recently, I was Ferris, what's his name again?
Tim Ferriss.
Tim Ferriss. Somebody he was interviewing said, whenever you give a score of 0 to 10, tell them they can't make 7. It forces people to either like or dislike something. But anyway, that would be my score for this, an 8 or a 9.
All right. So the key thing to realize is your subject line and your headline, as far as the reader is concerned, particularly if they're opening an email, they're the 2 most important things. If you don't get them to open the email and they don't love your headline and need to keep reading, whatever you've written after, it doesn't matter if it's 20 pages of brilliance. They're not going to read it. So these are very important, okay? As I said, this is our method of how we do it. We have worked for years to tweak and fix and incorporate other bits and pieces that we find work better for us. So, you can adapt it to yourself however you'd like. By the way, the reason I look off to the side is because so I can get the questions and still keep my screen open for you guys. So I'm getting a few. Let me take a quick look here from my old lady glasses.
And while Christine is having a look for the questions, if you I think the majority of people have Gmail, right? And in this particular market, it's like the biggest chunk, it's like 48%. But a lot of the email clients, people don't actually open the email. What they do is when they see the email, they can see the subject line, and they can see the first sentence. And based on that first sentence, they make a decision whether they're going to even read the email. So the lead, especially the first sentence in the lead, has to be strong enough for somebody to open it. And when you say, "Hi, John," you kind of waste that space. It's got to be straight from the very first word, because they can only see 7 or 8 words most of the time.
Yeah. Oh, and another tip on that, doubling up your subject line as like the beginning of your headline. Say you just went, well, I'll just take the first like 5 words out of my, out of my headline. That generally does not work because they can see both on their screen. You want your headline to be something that makes them go, gosh, I need to open that and read past the preview because that's interesting. Okay. So we've scored the non-existent subject line. We have scored the headline. And now we're into the top of the deck. And all of this top of the deck, which is building up the problem, which it does incredibly well, okay? But it's building up the problem. This whole section is quite literally just 1 score, okay? All those slides that I just paged through, that would be 1 score because what we're doing is we're building up the pain. If you remember last week, the 5-point pyramid, this is the pain or the dream. And this is very much a pain-centered email. So it's building up that pain. And Mark, since you started with the scoring,
so if we have
building the pain.
If we think of the scoring as you got 1 chunk or 1 block that is the subject line, 1 block that is the lead, and then you're going to have a PS, which is a chunk. The other 2 important parts that are in the deck would be the hook, which is how do you start off your email? Is that hook strong enough to pull them in? And then the copy itself, that would be the last 2 chunks. So the hook for this, I would give that, probably either a 9 or a 10 out of 10. It's perfect for what we're looking for You could sit down and nitpick, but it's as good as you're going to get. So I would give that a 10.
Okay. Now, see, we're playing this with you guys because we already know. We already did this. 2 questions that we've gotten in. Jean, and by the way, Jean, hi. Glad to see you back. Jean wanted to know, if you go through this process, do you still need to test your emails? Do you still need to test your copy?
Oh yeah, you got to keep, because nothing, people vote with their feet, right? Their feet in their wallets. So they will stay if it's good, and they will take actions in the email that we can see and recognize. But ultimately, even if we all agreed that this was a great email, if it didn't sell, that's the ultimate test. We missed something. Yeah. So as somebody who reads, and this is another reason as well why I'm very keen for people to read their own copy. It takes about a week to 2 weeks, but you do get into that rhythm, and you understand whether something's good or bad. It's like somebody was explaining to me, they could tell whether somebody was a good drummer or a bad drummer. And I couldn't, there's like, they both sounded the same to me. And he said, no, that's the great drummer, and this guy's an amateur. And it's only because that person had listened to hundreds, maybe thousands of hours of music and drums, and that was his particular thing. And it's the same with this. Regardless of how good you think this is or you are, ultimately, people will tell you by buying stuff. This particular email did very well.
Yes, it did. Okay, so as I said, it's a very long email. Okay, and this then brings in the custom gold. Then we get to the solution. Now, I've scrolled through 7 slides to get to this point. So, the copy in this, is important to note that the copy in this had to be a 10, or it never would have worked. Because 10 pages of less than, oh my God, the bank's going to close tomorrow and I'd better be ready. Anything less than perfect 10 in that situation, you can't do a long email. Just can't.
Yeah, just to let everybody know, when I first started writing this email, I actually had no intention of writing an 8 or 9 or 10-page email. But as you start writing it, you realize that if you don't go that deep into the problem, if you don't push the pain button that much, it needs legs to stand on, and I had to make it that long, I felt, in order for it to be effective. So, but it didn't start out that way.
So this is then the beginning of the solution. Okay, going into the Forex market, which is what this client's product does. Most liquid market in the world. And notice, now we've gone from paragraphs to bullet points. We want the solution to be very snappy and very fast in this case. It's not always the case, but in this case, snappy and fast. Okay, that Forex is, you can start for as little as $100. It's open 24 hours a day. They trade $5 trillion daily. The money is taken out of the market right away, so you don't have to wait for it. Profits are made off volatility, meaning this crazy market could make you more money. And you can learn to do it in a matter of hours. That's some pretty powerful bullet pointing right there. Okay, so that would be our solution, our promise. Okay, depending on what kind of background you have, there's a lot of different ways you could describe this. But basically, it's your promise. It's your, well, I'm going to solve your problem. Here's your aspirin. So this then goes into the specifics, what you need. There are only 2 things you need, okay, to make a 6 or 7-figure income in a matter of months. Only 2 things. Again, back to bullet points. These bullet points are slightly longer. but they're bullet points, which means we're reading them more quickly. I'm skimming through this, guys, because it is so long. We would be for hours and hours and hours if we did this whole thing. 2, you need a proven expert to show you how. So you need a great system and somebody to show you how to do it. Fortunately, nice big thing there in blue, there's a solution. And that's after he already set you up for the fact that a lot of people who call themselves experts have no business calling themselves experts. So then, even though he's already given you a big chunk of your solution, he's telling you now what's coming up is your solution. And this is where those open loops, which we saw at least 2 references to open loops earlier, this is where you start paying those off. And one of the questions that came in, Mark, from, I think it was Paul. I want to say it was Paul. Sorry if I got your name wrong. I apologize. Was that they wanted to know if you could do more than one open loop in an email.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to give them too many. I mean, I wouldn't suggest that you do more than 3, for example, because people don't, 1 is actually the best because they don't have to remember much. Just have this feeling that there's something. I mean, they don't say, "Oh, there's an open loop." They just, they just think,
they're going to tell me something.
I've got to keep reading.
Right. Now, in this case, sorry.
Go on.
I was just going to say, in this case, he's still only referring to the same open loop. He's just referred to it on more than one occasion. Okay. You can open more than one loop, but here's the kicker. You have to, as the writer, remember to close them before you finish, because if you leave an open loop hanging and you didn't answer it, you will lose trust points. And the only thing you get is you're getting these people to trust you. And if you don't close that loop and close it satisfactorily, you'll lose them. Okay. So we're at the solution and the specifics of the solution. Now, what I did here, we did not put the proof elements and proprietary client information that are in this email on screen for you because it's our client's information. Okay. We just want you to see what we did. So trust that I know that we had all kinds of great proof elements in here. And if you were on our webinar last week, you know what those rock solid slam dunk kind of things are. And then he goes back and he refers to what you just saw. Gives you more bullet points. Again, notice the top of the deck were paragraphs, they were quotes. It was like you were reading a story. The solution, much quicker, much snappier. Okay, it's a real shift in energy, which is one of the reasons this works so well. Another section of more things, and then it's going to happen whether you want it to or not, but here's how you need to be prepared. And then we get a scarcity play with the warning, this offer could expire at any time. In just a few minutes, the person who created it's taking it off the market. So you need to act quickly. So it's not just the world's going to end and the financial world's going to end and you're not prepared. The only thing that could save you is going to be gone in a matter of days. Okay? So then he builds that same thing up. Builds up, he reminds you of the problem again. He builds it up again in your mind and then adds in the solution and tells you can even try it risk-free for 2 months. And then he actually puts an order link right in the copy. This can be a risky move. You've got to be dead certain that what you're doing pays off. And the question ready to order is also risky because that's a yes/no question. And unless you know for sure their answer is yes, they could say no. And you don't want that. Okay, so that's the main deck That's all of the deck of this piece. And then there is a PS. And the PS, don't let the Wall Street gamblers and greedy bankers rob your family of the comfort and financial stability they deserve. This is your chance to secure it before this looming financial crisis ruins your future. Now, in this kind of a situation, then there would be another link at the end of the PS. So what would you give that score for a PS, Mark?
I'd probably give that a 7 or 8. Still high. Don't let the Wall Street gamblers and greedy bankers rob your family of the comfort and financial stability they deserve. It feels like you're on their side. This is your chance to secure it before this looming financial crisis ruins your future. One of the things I see and copy a lot and that people don't understand is you should be closing from the very first word. You know, you've got to ask for the sale. You should be closing all the time. So in your head, you know, you're going through all of this process and emotions and imagery and, you know, that understanding. Really, I think copywriters are amateur psychologists. You got to understand the people that you're talking to. But you got to always be thinking, I've got to close this sale. I've got to ask for the sale. And, you know, when people used to sell things face to face, knock on a door, you know, you told your story and you had to ask for the sale. And one of the things they used to tell you in sales was, don't forget to ask for the sale. So that's a good PS. A great PS to bump it up to a 9 or a 10 would have been to remind them to take an action.
Right. Okay. Now, we are coming up on 1 hour right now. So we need to make a decision. Do we want to go over the other one or do we want to save it for another time?
Let's just go over it quickly because we might not come back to this subject again. And okay. So what did you want to say about this one before I jump in?
It's from in the last week. I want you to know that. It's from the last week. I think I remembered to redact things in here, but I'm not entirely sure. So I hope I didn't screw something up. I just realized that. I was throwing it up here very quickly, so I hope I remembered to redact. If I didn't, oops. And other than that, it's within the last week, and I will share how it did at the end. And you guys can tell us. And also, what did you guys think? We kind of told you and led you by the nose on that first one, telling you it was great copy. Okay. This one, let's get you guys to vote. Okay. Like on the subject line, put your 0 to 10 in each section up on the screen and we'll look at it. Okay. So, and if this is after we're live and you're watching this on YouTube, by all means, put it in the comments. That'd be cool. Okay. So go for it, Mark.
Well, it starts off with an instant 124% return on investment. Yep. So an instant 124%, you know, if you wanted to, and there's reasons why I know you did this, it's a little bit long because a lot of people can't see that subject line. They will only see the first 3 to 4 words. So if you had an instant 124% per month or something, it might have pulled higher, but that's a good subject line. So if you were scoring from 10, that would probably be a 7. And then it's got, he bought 800 million nickels to prove that the secret to getting rich has nothing to do with winning big. Learn the secret in this email. Learn that secret in this email. So the lead is good, and you've got learn that secret in this email. So you're telling the reader that they're going to learn something. You know, the secret is in this email if they take the time to read it. So the lead, I would also, you know, there's not many people who will read this who have 800 million, right? So they won't recognize that. So if you said 800 with an M, it might have been a 9 out of 10. So I'd give that an 8 out of 10, which is still very good. Massively wealthy guys like Paul Tudor Jones, Nicola Delic, and Kyle Bass all have one big thing in common. They only invest when they are virtually guaranteed a huge reward for a very small risk. So it's telling the people in there that the tone or the information in this email is about how they do it. How do they get guaranteed returns for very little risk? So at this point in time, the reader will have decided whether they're going to read this email. And something I never mentioned earlier is that it looks really big on my screen, but in an email, you could see maybe a lot more of the email, and how visually appealing it is has an effect on its readership. Because if something looks like it's, a scientific journal and it's just pages of text, people won't read it. So people never read everything anyway, not anymore. They skim. And using bolds tells the reader what part is important to you, so it should be important to them. So as they skim through it, bolding things can be, the right sentences can be very important. Jones famously only takes an investment if for every dollar he risks, he gets a $5 profit, meaning that he could guess wrong twice and still make 20% on his money. Pretty good odds, eh? This previously ungettable Wall Street secret is proven to make an average of 2% per trade and limit your risk to 0.5%. That's a 300% return on investment. Learn more here. Now, there's every email has its own story. So the previous email, the whole thing is you should be able to make a decision based on that email. This email's job is to tell a good story, pre-sell, but ultimately to get somebody to the sales page. So if you want to get somebody to the sales page, they used to say that you want to have 3 links above the fold, because that's all you want to do is to get them there. But this kind of is doing double duty. And but so far it's very good. So that's the hook, is that you're going to learn something here that other great investors have a secret to. So as part of the hook, I'd give that an 8 as well. So we've got the beginnings of a good email. It's got a good subject line, it's got a good lead, and the hook's good. And remember that when you write every single day and you're writing multiple emails, you don't have the luxury of going off and sitting under a tree with a pad and thinking that, oh, let's just brainstorm this for a few hours. You're always under the gun to get things done. So with the parameters that Christine and Brad are working with, this is good. Brad, any comments?
Is he muted again? Is he pantomiming?
Oh, there we go. Sorry. No, I don't think so, Mark. I love the story in this, and I thought the lead was great. The hook is great. Christine obviously did some research here, and this was a really interesting email to read. You just, people say, well, what's this particular piece of copy in the email? Like, what's its function? Well, every single sentence that you read here, its whole job is to get you to read the next one. And if it does that, then you've got a chance of getting somebody to click or buy something. And I think this email did a really good job of that. Anyway, off you go there.
The one thing that was appealing to me is I knew this story before Christine had written it. And the images as well, what kind of images, if you're going to use images. There's something very appealing about all of the American coins. There was an article from people who collect coins. I can't remember is it pneumatics? Not pneumatics. Anyway, there's a magazine for people who collect coins, and they had a vote to see what the most beautiful coin ever made was, and the vote was a British gold sovereign. But second, I think, was like a double eagle, or most of them were American coins, very beautiful coins. So they're eye-catching to begin with, and and it's money. If you put something up that's money, people will look at it, whether it's a note or a coin. What is that person saying? So it goes on, and Kyle Bass means during a subprime mortgage crisis with an outrageous risk to reward ratio. Bass turned 30 million into 2 billion by only investing when he was sure of a $6 return for every $1 risk. And in the last 5 years, Bass had put $40 million into nickels. Why? Because the metals used to produce that nickel are worth 6.2 cents. So every nickel is worth more than its face value to the metals market. Now, if you listen to me as I read this, I didn't stumble. There was no words in there that I didn't understand. And, they were arranged in the correct way. Because sometimes you can have the makings of great copy, but they put the Lego pieces in such an awkward way that it's hard to say. So you can say that this part flows well, right? So it's easy for somebody to read. They don't have to use a lot of brain power. So every 5 cents he invests is already worth 6.2 cents. Don't worry, I'm not going to tell you to go sink your cash into nickels, although if you put some there, it's got an upside. I want to show you how anyone who has $50 to $100 to start investing could make 100% to 300% on their cash every month like clockwork. Now, it's interesting here because we've got 2 types of people in the financial niche. You've got people who have already bought products, and we kind of know who they are, and it might be somebody who's bought anything from $7 up to $1,000. And then you have people who haven't bought products, and this email is directed to them, and it's this much smaller niche. You don't know if they've even got money, right? So you want to talk to them about $500 to $100. Anybody should have that much money, and if they don't, you're the wrong person to be talking to anyway.
Yep. Oh, good. I did remember to take the good things out. Okay. I couldn't remember. So we get meatier now. You can see that the paragraphs are a little bit longer. But again, like Mark said, people skim. So notice there's particular things that are bolded.
Yes, I think that, and he found the biggest reward for the smallest risk. Just go down one more. Is the next one coming up to the PS?
Yes.
Here's where you can learn. Yeah, to see PS. The secret has automated is not the secret has automated is no robot, but a software-aided mechanical trading system based on the proprietary algorithm he developed that made him a millionaire. Now, although there's a lot of big words in there, they're not hard to say and they're not unfamiliar to people in this niche. And then made one Wall Street brokerage firm a whole lot of more cash when they licensed it for their own use. It is so powerful it turns brand new traders into money makers like this. See how easy this wealth building secret is to use here. So you can tell there's I hesitated a little bit. So the flow here is not as great as the deck, but it's still not hard, right? It's still not difficult. It's only when people get to something like, what the hell is that word? Or this is backwards, or that's a real block. But this is still good. So the secret. Now we can tell you that again in this particular niche, if you had a sentence or a subject line that had the word secret in it, it will generally outpull anything else. It's just one of those things.
Yep.
Automated. People don't want to work, right? But a software-aided mechanical trading system. So, people don't have time. And one of the most valuable things that people value now is time. So if you can talk to them about, you don't have to read and learn a lot of stuff, and it's not going to take a lot of time, it's appealing to them. And we've got some proof in there about the Wall Street brokerage firm. So again, a good, solid email that had a good subject line, a good lead, a good hook to get them in there, explains your story, and then the PS is a reminder. And why is a PS so important is because other than this, the 3 things that people we've noticed pay attention to are, well, number 1, who's it from? right? That's the most important thing. That's going to determine who opens your email more than anything else, because if you get an email from your mother or your brother, you open that email. So if it's from somebody you like, know, and trust, you open the email. Next is the subject line. And then it's a toss-up between the lead and the PS, because people are really under pressure, will read the lead and then jump to the PS. So it's important in the PS to always, think of it as a summary of the whole email. So, and a link, right? You got to give them something to click. But the PS is one of the most important parts, and it's one of the most things that people never pay attention to.
Yep. And if you have a skimmer in particular, there are people that will literally scroll down to the bottom because they figure if you know what you're doing, and they may not know anything about copy. They just know that when they get these kinds of emails, that the bottom is where the payoff is. So they'll scroll down there. So your PS, and there are things that aren't in this PS, like this ... that leads to a piece of proof that we redacted out of this email. So there were actually big pieces of rock solid proof in this that helped build this out a little bit. Now you notice this email is significantly shorter than that first one. Okay, significantly shorter. And whereas the first email built up problem, and solution, this email, if you remember our last webinar, pain or dream. Okay, you want to have the pain or the dream. This one's selling the dream. 800 million nickels. That's $40 million. Somebody had $40 million to buy nickels with. That's a dream. The fact that you say that you can start with $50 to $100 and you can make this much money, that's feeding into the dream. Now, everything that we're saying is completely true. Okay, Kyle Bass really is an investor. Kyle Bass really did sink $40 million into nickels. It's all written up. As a matter of fact, Anthony Robbins famously wrote about him in Money Master the Game. And this kind of stuff, it resonates because it's real, because it's true. I didn't make up some random person and say he bought $800 million worth of nickels. And for people who are in our niche who do buy product and who have some idea of what we're talking about, Kyle Bass is a name they may know. And when we talk in this PS, a software-aided mechanical trading system, if you know nothing about trading, the fact that it's not a robot may actually seem weird to you. The fact that we say it's not a robot and then it's mechanical too, that may seem weird to you. But if you're in the financial niche, you know that a mechanical system is actually the opposite of a robot. And so that speaks to those people. So while the bulk of this email is for people who maybe haven't ever invested or traded, there are keywords and phrases throughout this email that tell someone who has, we get you. Okay. So overall, what do you guys out there in webinar land, where do you score it at? Did it speak to you? Was I whistling Dixie?
8 out of 10, I see.
Second, see if anybody else. Yep, I see an 8 out of 10. Okay. The reality with this was evaluatively, when we put it through our process, this scored incredibly high. This scored 9 out of 10 in our evaluative process. However, when we talk about what the market ultimately decides, and no matter what we think, even if it's the most educated opinion that we don't know, this email, shockingly, only scored, what was it, 9.18 or something like that percent on our test. Now, it's important to understand that's our test list percentage. And I didn't pull those tests. I didn't give you a graphic of that. But our test list is a list that we just beat these poor people over the head. We're kind of amazed that they open our emails. So the fact that we get them to open them means we did something really, really right. However, like our basement of where we're okay, where we'll go, okay, that was all right then, is 10%. And this one did not score even a 10% open rate. Was very surprising. Or not open rate, click-through rate, which was very surprising. And because this email's gone out in the last week, I'm actually not privy to how much it sold or it didn't. I honestly don't know at this point. But the test results were surprising. Now, it did actually win its split test day. So it went out to our main list for this client and hopefully did its job. But it just goes to show that you can be super excited about something and think, man, I've got this. This is a slam dunk. And the market wasn't in the mood that day. Wasn't in the mood for what you were selling, or it wasn't in the mood for your story. Something. Sometimes you have no control over it at all. You have no idea. And that's what happens. So, guys, do you have any questions for us at this point? Anything that you loved about either of those emails? Anything that you thought we were off our nut? Do you understand the process as we've explained it to you? Did you catch all those particular places we break an email out into and how we score them? Is there anything we can clarify?
I think we'll finish with this one question, Christine, from Jim. Given the results of the second email, how do you recover from that? What are some of the steps you would take moving forward?
That's a good question. The first thing, once you smooth your ruffled feathers, is to go, okay, so I'm not. On this day, I didn't do what I thought I was going to do. And you try to gauge, but you don't have a crystal ball. So you try to gauge what it is the market's telling you. And in this case, we look at it and say, okay, the market is telling us that maybe the dream and or greed are not the big selling points right now. That would be my first thought. And as a person who wrote the email, that would be the thought process I went into. What do you two think?
Well, I think that email, if you look at the score, the open rate and the click-through rate, and if they were both really, really good, but it didn't sell, it could be brought back in later, couldn't it, Mark? And try it again.
Yeah. I mean, I think personally with that particular email, because it was to a list of people who hadn't bought a product yet, either we never explained it well enough, or we overshot them, and we never made it basic enough. I still think that fear and greed will motivate people into action, but that's it. I mean, I read it and thought it was going to be pool great. I mean, so there you go. You never know. So even though you might be right 9 times out of 10, you never know. But to answer Jim's question, I think when he says, how do you recover from that? If you write an email that doesn't do what you expected, I think what he's asking is, psychologically, emotionally, as a writer, what do you do when you don't hit it out the park every day? So how would you answer that?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Brad.
Oh, no. Well, there's days, Christine and I compete head to head, and there's weeks when she just kills me, and it doesn't seem to matter what I do, and that could be a whole bunch of different things. And there's other, there's times when you're just never at the top of your game all the time. If you could write perfectly every day, that would be amazing, but I don't know anybody that can do that. So you have some good days and you have some bad days, and you just roll with them, and you try and do the best you can every day. That's what you do.
Yeah. Now, Brad and I are two very different kinds of people when it comes to that. Brad famously claims he's not competitive. He doesn't even really like to look at the results.
Nope.
I'm
Nope.
super competitive. I like to win. The win for me, it's a game. Okay, it's a personal game. And while this email didn't hit that 10%, which irritates me, I did win. And that means that piece became the control, right? That's the piece that went out. There are moments where you want to strut and pat yourself on the back, but then you look and go, well, crap, yeah, I won, but that was an ugly win. I probably take it harder when I don't do well than Brad does because I am competitive. And sometimes I won't look at critiques coming in on the new copy or anything until I've already written what's coming up for the next day, because I have a tendency, I'm one of those people, I'll let it cloud my confidence, and you can't do that. If you are not confident when you are writing, it comes through in the copy. You have got to seem rock solid. You've got to seem completely sure. Because you're not, if you're a copywriter, unless you're writing for your own business, you're not writing for yourself. You are writing for a client. And that client needs you to be confident and certain and sure. So you can't let it rattle you. Now, when you've been doing this for a number of years, like we have, it happens. Like Brad said, you have a bad day, or you have a bad week. Hopefully you don't have more than a bad week, but it can happen. And when that happens, you just have to go, okay, I'm human. I'm in a slump. I need to get out of the slump. In most cases for me, the number one thing I do is I go back to one and I go, okay, I thought this was really, really kick ass and it didn't do the job. So let me go find something else that I think is every bit as kick ass. An idea, what I mean is a hook or an idea that is as kick ass, and do it again and do it better. But again, I'm aware that I'm hyper competitive. In Brad's case, Brad's take on that, what do you do, Brad, when you think you've knocked it out of the park and it fell flat?
Well, of course you're disappointed. I mean, yeah, because you put your heart and soul into all these emails, and the bottom line is they either make money or they don't. But you got to get back up and just get back into the game. You take the criticism that you get from the other people on your team, and try and learn something from that so that you're improving every day. The other thing that I think you got to remember too is that if you have a large list, your email maybe it's not going to resonate on a certain day with the people that are actually opening it. If there's in our case, if we're writing in the financial niche and there's a lot of doom and gloom and investors are holding their hanging on to their cash, they're not going to be interested maybe in buying your product. So there's going to be days when technically you did hit it out of the park, but nobody bought anything because there's other things going on. So you got to take the criticism, try and learn something from it, and do better with your emails. But you can't beat yourself up every day, or you'll never write decent copy in as well.
Anything you'd like to add there, Mark?
Well, I think I had this conversation before with it was either one of you or David, that when I write, or if you write, if you're doing your best or the best you can in that day, then that has to be enough, right? You can't beat yourself up about what happened previously, or I've seen copywriters who go almost into manic depression if they just can't, win a split test. It's like somehow they equate the results to who they are as a human being. It's not like that. You know, everybody goes through the good times and the bad, and sometimes they'll hit it out of the park, and sometimes they won't. But as long as you know you're doing your best, that's it. And one of the ways I think is if you are in the story yourself, because, and I have no evidence of this whatsoever, but when you're writing and you're actually in your head talking to that person, you are communicating an idea, you're getting excited as you write the parts that are excited, and you're really into that story, somehow that communicates in the written word. But when people are just writing for the sake of writing, and they've got X amount of words to do, they've got to knock out a 400 word or a 500 or 1,000 word blog post, and there's no love there, it comes across as well. So it's kind of like children. Whether you're having a good day or a bad day, you got to love them, right? So you got to do your best to be present when you're writing. And if you've done that, if you've done your best to be present and you've done the best job you could on that day, that's all anyone can ask.
Yep. You see here. Yeah, we already pretty much did the Q&A as we went through, and I hope you guys got what you wanted out of it. If you want to talk copy with us, and we love to talk copy. If you want to talk copy with us, get tips, tricks, our professional feedback on your work, which I don't know how long we'll be able to offer that, but right now we are. You can join our Facebook group, and we will put the link to the Facebook group when we post this on YouTube, and in a follow-up email, we will put those links in for you to join the Facebook group. And when this video goes up, we'll let you know about it as well. But if you join that, we will definitely be in there. It's me, Mark, Brad, David, who hasn't been with us recently, but he will be again soon. All talking copy and getting pretty excited about it. If you'd like to see any of the webinars that you've missed and some other bonus videos and content, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel. Again, there'll be a follow-up that comes to you that'll give you these links. And our YouTube channel, if you just search Scientific Copy on YouTube, you'll find us also. So you go to our YouTube channel and find that. Also on our website, you can find that. If you want to talk copy about us, how we can improve your profits with copy, you can drop us a line at scientificcopy.com/client. And if you want to learn how to write copy, be one of the few we might choose to work with, leave your details at scientificcopy.com/learn copy. And make sure you join the Facebook group. Now, we did use a few questions today. Jim, most notably, I know we've got. I think we got Paul and Jean. Jean's going to build a veritable copywriting library because we keep using her questions. And that's a great thing, because every time we do, we send the new book. So everybody whose question we used, email me at Christine@scientificcopy.com. And I will personally make sure that we get your details and we send you the copy of the book Copy Logic, which is Agora's secret sauce formula that they use to build their business. We hope you have enjoyed this here today. We certainly enjoyed it. We went over what we planned for sure, time-wise, but we hope that you got something out of it. If you have any questions at any point in time, please feel free, use my email address and write to me. That is perfectly fine. I'd love to hear from you. Join the Facebook group. Ask questions there. Gentlemen, do you have anything you'd like to add?
No, I think you got it.
I think so.
Okay. Have a great week, guys, and we will see you next week. A tip for not this coming week, but the week during the weekend after that. Brad and I are both going to be at the Traffic and Conversion Summit in San Diego. And I plan on doing some very interesting extra content pieces while I'm there. So keep your eyes open for that. We will be expanding and doing things on location. Exciting. Okay, guys, have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.